You're listening to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, created to help you succeed in your PMP certification journey. Learn more at baremetalcyber.com, where additional prepcasts, books, and training materials await. Let's get started. The process domain is often described as the delivery engine of project management, moving systematically from planning into execution, monitoring and controlling, and eventually closure or transition. This cycle is not a rigid formula, but a flexible framework that adapts to context. Predictive approaches emphasize detailed upfront planning and formal monitoring, while agile approaches focus on short, iterative cycles of delivery and feedback. Hybrid models blend both, tailoring structure and adaptability. Across all approaches, one principle recurs: impact analysis before action. In other words, before changing scope, shifting resources, or updating baselines, the project manager must pause to understand consequences. The PMP exam reflects this by consistently rewarding answers that prioritize thoughtful evaluation before quick fixes. An important nuance is that process domain questions rarely appear in isolation. They often embed elements from the people domain and the business environment domain. For example, a monitoring scenario may also test whether you can recognize stakeholder concerns or compliance obligations. The ability to see these connections demonstrates holistic thinking. The exam expects candidates to integrate human, technical, and contextual dimensions in their reasoning. This mirrors real projects, where processes are always enacted through people and shaped by organizational constraints. The process domain provides the structure, but it lives in dialogue with the human and environmental realities that make each project unique. Planning lies at the heart of the process domain, forming the blueprint for coordinated action. Core components include defining scope, creating a schedule, estimating and managing costs, setting quality standards, allocating resources, and establishing communication pathways. Each of these elements ensures clarity about what will be delivered, when, at what cost, and with what level of quality. In practice, planning also forces conversations about assumptions and constraints, two factors that shape every future decision. For example, assuming vendor availability or a fixed budget sets boundaries that later affect scope trade-offs. Effective planning is not about predicting the future with certainty, but about creating a shared map that can adapt as the journey unfolds. Risk planning, procurement strategy, and stakeholder engagement are also crucial planning dimensions. Risk planning involves identifying potential uncertainties and designing proactive responses to either prevent or mitigate impact. Procurement strategy determines whether external vendors will be used, and, if so, how contracts will be structured. Stakeholder engagement planning ensures that the right people are informed, consulted, or involved at the right moments. Each of these areas adds layers of foresight and protection. Without them, projects drift into reactive mode, constantly fighting fires. The PMP exam often highlights failures in these areas, such as neglecting to identify risks, because such oversights create cascading problems downstream. Integration across plans is a vital skill that separates strong project managers from average ones. Creating siloed subplans for scope, schedule, or cost is easy. Weaving them into one coherent, integrated plan is the real challenge. This means aligning assumptions, resolving conflicts, and ensuring dependencies are mapped. For example, a schedule promising rapid delivery may clash with a resource plan that shows insufficient staffing. Integration exposes these mismatches early, when adjustments are easier. Tailoring is also essential, choosing the right level of detail and documentation for the context. A small agile project may rely on lightweight artifacts, while a large regulatory project demands detailed formal plans. Adaptability is the hallmark of planning mastery. Execution represents the transition from intention to action, and urgency is a defining characteristic in this domain. Delivering increments or milestones that create early benefits demonstrates value to stakeholders and keeps momentum alive. In predictive approaches, this may mean delivering partial functionality or early prototypes, while in agile contexts, increments are delivered through short iterations. The focus is always on realizing benefits sooner rather than later. This urgency is not about rushing recklessly, but about aligning work to value streams. By demonstrating progress visibly, a project manager maintains stakeholder confidence and motivates the team to sustain energy and focus. Managing communications and stakeholders during execution is as important as producing deliverables. Execution can only succeed when people understand what is happening, why it matters, and how they should contribute. This requires continuous dialogue with stakeholders to confirm that outputs remain aligned with expectations. Miscommunication during execution often leads to rework, which erodes both trust and efficiency. The project manager's task is to keep information flowing clearly, ensuring stakeholders feel heard and informed. The PMP exam frequently tests this through scenarios where the best next step is not producing more output but recalibrating communication to resolve confusion or misalignment. Empowering teams, removing impediments, and protecting baseline integrity form another triad of execution responsibilities. Empowerment means granting teams the authority to make decisions within defined boundaries. Removing impediments requires vigilance and proactive problem-solving to keep work flowing smoothly. Protecting baseline integrity ensures that agreed goals for scope, cost, and schedule are not altered casually. This balance is delicate. Teams need freedom to adapt, but uncontrolled changes can destabilize delivery. The exam often presents situations that test whether a candidate knows when to empower, when to intervene, and when to escalate. Strong execution is about balancing flexibility with disciplined stewardship. Execution is never static. It unfolds through inspect and adapt loops. In predictive projects, these loops appear as formal reviews, milestone checks, or earned value assessments. In agile contexts, they manifest as daily stand-ups, sprint reviews, and retrospectives. Regardless of method, the goal is continuous recalibration. These loops ensure that progress remains aligned with objectives, risks are addressed early, and learning is captured in real time. The PMP exam often emphasizes the importance of iterative feedback even in predictive settings, reflecting a broader industry trend toward adaptability. A project manager who ignores feedback loops risks drifting off course, even if every task appears complete. Monitoring and controlling is the companion phase to execution, providing guardrails and accountability. Performance is measured against baselines or forecasts, allowing the project manager to detect variances early. Monitoring is not just about collecting data but about interpreting meaning. Is a cost variance temporary noise or a sign of systemic risk? Controlling then involves acting on these insights to bring the project back in line. The PMP exam tests not only knowledge of measurement tools, but also judgment in interpreting results. It asks candidates to distinguish between situations that require corrective action and those where patience is wiser. Change management plays a central role in controlling. In predictive projects, this involves formal change control boards, documented impact analysis, and updated baselines. In agile projects, change may be absorbed through backlog reprioritization guided by clear policies. Both approaches emphasize that change should never bypass structured evaluation. Issue management complements this by distinguishing between anticipated risks and problems that have already materialized. Capturing knowledge and maintaining an audit trail of decisions ensures transparency and supports accountability. The exam often focuses on whether candidates follow the principle of impact analysis before action, highlighting the dangers of impulsive decisions. Knowing when to escalate and when not to is another subtle skill in monitoring and controlling. Escalation is necessary when issues exceed the authority or capacity of the team, such as regulatory breaches or resource shortfalls beyond the project's control. However, reflexive escalation undermines team ownership and slows responsiveness. Effective project managers first explore options for resolution within their sphere of influence before seeking higher-level intervention. In exam scenarios, Answers that demonstrate thoughtful escalation after attempting resolution at the appropriate level align most closely with PMI's expectations. Escalation is a tool of last resort, not a shortcut for avoiding responsibility. Closure and transition mark the final stage of the process journey, ensuring that project outcomes are accepted and embedded into the organization. Acceptance involves stakeholders formally approving deliverables, while handover ensures operational teams are ready to assume ownership. Benefits enablement is crucial. Projects do not exist merely to produce outputs, but to create value. For example, delivering a new system is meaningless unless users adopt it and business processes improve. The exam frequently tests this distinction, reminding candidates that closure is not about checking off tasks but about securing outcomes. Administrative close, contract wrap-up, and vendor finalization are equally important during closure. These activities involve settling outstanding payments, verifying deliverables, and formally releasing resources. Ignoring them leaves loose ends that may create legal or financial risk. Lessons learned sessions capture knowledge for future projects, turning experience into organizational wisdom. Documentation from closure becomes part of the knowledge base, ensuring that future teams benefit from past insights. In exam questions, answers that include thorough administrative close typically reflect best practice, showing that project management responsibility extends beyond immediate deliverables. Finally, stabilizing operations and measuring early outcomes provide a bridge between project and business value. Operational teams need time to adjust, and early indicators help confirm whether benefits are materializing. This may involve monitoring adoption rates, error levels, or customer satisfaction metrics. By validating these outcomes, project managers ensure that benefits realization continues beyond project boundaries. In the exam, this understanding helps distinguish between merely delivering outputs and truly enabling value. Closure is not just an ending, but a handoff into ongoing success. For more cyber-related content and books, please check out cyberauthor.me. Also, there are other prepcasts on cybersecurity and more at baremetalcyber.com. Choosing the right methodology is one of the first and most important steps in structuring a project. Predictive approaches work best when requirements are stable and risks are well understood. Agile approaches shine when uncertainty is high, requirements evolve rapidly, or customer feedback needs to shape delivery continuously. Hybrid methods attempt to capture the strengths of both, offering structure while retaining adaptability. Governance then provides the framework that defines how decisions are made, who has authority, and when checkpoints occur. Good governance does not smother agility. Rather, it provides clarity about escalation paths and accountability. On the exam, you can expect to be asked not only which methodology fits, but also how to document and justify your choice. Governance structures can take many forms, but their purpose is always the same: to keep the project aligned with organizational priorities while protecting transparency. Decision rights define who approves budgets, changes, or deliverables. Checkpoints, whether in the form of steering committees, sprint reviews, or phase gates, create rhythm and oversight. For governance to succeed, it must remain visible and accessible without becoming friction. A project weighed down by excessive review boards risks stagnation, while one with no governance risks drifting without accountability. The exam emphasizes striking the right balance, maintaining oversight while allowing teams the space to deliver. Documenting tailoring decisions is a critical practice in governance. Tailoring means adapting processes, methods, and artifacts to fit the specific context of the project. For instance, you might decide that a full work breakdown structure is excessive for a small project, but essential for a large one. The rationale for tailoring should be recorded so that stakeholders understand why certain practices are emphasized or streamlined. Documentation protects the project manager by showing decisions were thoughtful, not arbitrary. On the exam, tailoring often appears as a theme. The correct answer is usually the one that adapts best to context while still respecting governance requirements. Change control is perhaps the most familiar process in project management, and its pattern is worth committing to memory. Capture the request, analyze the impact, seek approval, implement, and update baselines. Skipping any of these steps creates risk. Capturing ensures nothing is overlooked. Impact analysis evaluates effects on scope, schedule, cost, quality, and risk. Approval ensures accountability. Implementation makes the change real, and updating baselines preserves a consistent source of truth. The exam repeatedly tests whether candidates follow this sequence, especially emphasizing that baselines should only be updated after approval, not before. This discipline protects projects from uncontrolled drift. Communicating change decisions is as important as making them. Stakeholders need to know not only what was approved, but why and what impacts they should expect. Without communication, approved changes can still create confusion or resistance. A project manager ensures that decisions are transparent and that everyone affected understands the adjustments. Maintaining artifact integrity, keeping schedules, budgets, and scope documents synchronized, prevents multiple conflicting versions from circulating. In agile projects, the mechanics look different. Backlog reprioritization occurs under policy-driven rules, but the principle of transparency remains. The exam tests this by contrasting sloppy change practices with structured, well-communicated approaches. Risk and issue management follow a rhythm that must be internalized. Risks are identified, analyzed, response plans developed, responses implemented, and performance monitored. Each cycle creates learning that feeds into the next, triggers specific events, or thresholds signal when a risk response must be activated. Owners are assigned to ensure accountability, and effectiveness checks confirm whether responses are working. Issues differ from risks because they are problems already materialized. Logging issues separately avoids confusion, and escalation follows established policy. The exam often checks whether you know to keep assumptions alive, documented, and periodically tested so they can be converted to risks or issues when necessary. Assumptions are particularly tricky because they often masquerade as facts. For example, assuming that a vendor will deliver on time or that a system will integrate smoothly may feel certain until evidence proves otherwise. A disciplined project manager revisits assumptions regularly, validating them against actual conditions. When assumptions prove uncertain, they should be logged as risks. When they fail outright, they become issues requiring immediate action. The exam rewards candidates who demonstrate attentiveness to this life cycle, rather than treating assumptions as fixed. This illustrates how rigorous thinking prevents surprises from derailing projects. Procurement and vendor management form another key area of the process domain. Early in planning, project managers face make or buy decisions, whether to produce in-house or purchase externally. If external procurement is chosen, selecting the right contract type is critical. Fixed-price contracts transfer more risk to the vendor, while cost-reimbursable contracts keep flexibility but shift risk back to the buyer. Time and materials contracts blend aspects of both. Governance ensures that vendor selection follows fair and transparent processes. The exam often highlights procurement scenarios to test whether you can align contract type with project risk and organizational priorities. Vendor relationships extend beyond contract signatures. Performance oversight ensures deliverables meet expectations, while relationship management maintains trust and collaboration. Issues inevitably arise, and a project manager's ability to resolve them without escalating into disputes is a mark of maturity. Change control must also extend across organizational boundaries. A vendor cannot unilaterally adjust timelines or scope. Changes must flow through agreed channels to keep the project synchronized. On the exam, the best answers often emphasize proactive vendor management and consistent application of change control principles across parties. Closeout and claims handling finalize the procurement cycle. Closeout involves confirming that deliverables are accepted, obligations fulfilled, and documentation archived. Claims may arise if one party believes the other failed to meet terms. Handling these requires fairness, documentation, and often legal or contractual expertise. A project manager who closes out carefully avoids lingering liabilities. The PMP exam reflects this reality by including scenarios where failure to close out contracts properly leads to risk. Candidates must recognize that procurement is not complete until closeout is documented and disputes resolved. When considering exam pitfalls in the process domain, a few patterns emerge repeatedly. Approving changes without impact analysis is always incorrect. It demonstrates reactive thinking rather than disciplined evaluation. Similarly, re-baselining before approval contradicts best practice. Baselines must be updated only after approval is granted. These traps appear frequently because they mirror common real-world mistakes. Recognizing them reinforces exam readiness and real-world competence alike. Another frequent exam pitfall involves ignoring stakeholders while focusing on technical steps. Even the best technical solution can fail if stakeholders are not informed, aligned, or supportive. The exam often frames this as a choice between completing the right technical fix in isolation or pausing to engage stakeholders. The correct path almost always involves stakeholder engagement first. This reflects the underlying truth that projects succeed through human alignment, not just technical accuracy. A project manager must therefore resist the temptation to act unilaterally, even with the best intentions. Finally, the exam often challenges candidates to recognize when a chosen method contradicts stated constraints. For instance, selecting a predictive approach for a project with highly volatile requirements signals poor tailoring. Similarly, proposing agile rituals in a tightly regulated environment without adaptation shows a lack of judgment. PMI expects project managers to tailor thoughtfully, aligning method to context, constraints, and risks. Avoiding these pitfalls means reading questions carefully, recognizing embedded constraints, and applying judgment rooted in process discipline. By internalizing these lessons, learners become not just exam-ready, but better practitioners capable of guiding projects responsibly. Thanks for tuning in to the Bare Metal Cyber Prepcast, your trusted source for cybersecurity news and insights. Remember to subscribe at baremetalcyber.com so you never miss an update. And visit cyberauthor.me for best-selling cybersecurity books that equip you with expert knowledge. Until next time, stay secure and stay vigilant.